The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We are pleased to welcome back Pennsylvania Speaker of the House of Representatives, a Democrat from the 191st Legislative District, JoAnna McClinton. A lifelong resident of Philadelphia and graduate of Grace Temple Christian Academy, JoAnna became active in her community and went on to earn her degree in political science from LaSalle University. She continued her postgraduate education by earning a Juris Doctorate from Villanova University School of Law. While there, she interned at the Regional Housing Legal Services as well as the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, so she checks the box of having been a former prosecutor. As a lawyer, she became Chief Assistant Public Defender for Philadelphia, so she's got that box checked as well. Politically, in 2013, JoAnna became Chief Counsel to Pennsylvania Senator Anthony Hardy Williams, where she was integrally involved in policy development and legislation. She was elected in her own right to the House of Representatives in 2015. She entered leadership in 2018 by being elected as the Democratic Caucus Chairwoman, and in November 2020, JoAnna was elected Democratic House Leader. We look forward to discussing her views on the Pennsylvania budget, which has a ticking time bomb deadline of June the 30th. Also, the $5.4 billion for public education that's been recommended by a special committee tasked with making Pennsylvania compliant with the recommendations and order by the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania. And finally, the areas of compromise with the Republican-controlled Senate, because unless it gets through the Senate, we will not have a budget in Pennsylvania.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Madam Speaker, welcome back to the Volpe Report.
Thank you.
What is it like governing and leading with a one vote majority?
Chuck, thank you so much for having me back. Well, they say you can't judge another person until you walk in their shoes. I don't know if Speaker Johnson wears high-heeled stilettos or my very fashionable running shoes that I like to wear on the floor of the House to keep my posture right and to keep that arthritis down. Yeah. So I don't know what he's going through, but I will say he does not have a one-seat majority. He has not had 6 special elections in 1 year. But I can say in Harrisburg, we've been doing a good job because all of our ideas that we've sent through the House have been middle of the road. The truth is, when you have a slim margin, you can't cater to one crowd or the other. You have to build consensus and you have to get support. And I'm so proud that almost every bill that passes out of the House has bipartisan support.
Right. Well, yeah, and my touche for being that type of leader with the intelligence to understand that you can posture all you want and even carry votes with one vote, but you're going into a Republican-controlled Senate where bills will go to die if you don't have bipartisan support. You know, I mentioned you off camera, whether you like him or not, you know, Speaker Johnson, who is now about to get a vacate motion again, like they did at Kevin McCarthy, because a bill was passed that was necessary for this country. The president said he's going to sign it. Chuck Schumer has said that it's going to pass the Senate. We needed to get aid to our allies and to do certain things, and without Democratic votes, that wouldn't have happened. So there are enough moderate people on both sides of the aisle, thankfully, to get stuff done. But it's a difficult task because you may have a wish list to get to Governor Shapiro's desk that will get signed, but then you got the Senate. So you have done an amazing job. So let's talk about, as a segue, we have June 30th looming for our budget. We haven't had a show, I'll tell you, JoAnna, I won't say distracted because that would not be the right way. We've had some very important shows. I mentioned a couple of them to you off camera. But I have gotten away from the Pennsylvania issue and the budget specifically. The last speaker I had was Senate Majority Leader Joe Pittman, talking about, and it came right after the governor's address. The governor did his budget address. The next week I had Senator Pittman on. We have not been back to it since then. The good news is for the show and my audience, that's enough time that maybe stuff's gotten done and some movement has been had and some compromises have been made. So take it from there. Give us an overview of the Pennsylvania budget.
So the governor provided an overview of his budget proposal in February. That simply means a wish list. We know our children around the holidays, they say, hey, mom, hey, dad, hey, godmom Joe, here's what I'd like to see under the tree if you celebrate those holidays. And a lot of my neighbors do. The governor did the same thing in February. He said, we need to spend more money in schools. We need to raise the minimum wage. We've got to do all the things that we haven't been able to accomplish yet since he's been in office. And of course, he's down 1 year into his second year. And for those of us in the state house, we are wrapping up a full term come November. So one of the things that we're really looking to build consensus on is continuing to save taxpayer money. We were able last year to get through the property tax rent rebate expansion to help our seniors stay in their homes. We were able to do the tripling the amount of the dependent care or child care tax credit. So parents who got their tax refund or they're about to get it, it's going to be much larger than it was before. So we look forward to putting money back into taxpayer pockets. And one of the main ways that we're able to do that is by investing in public education, because that means school districts like mine and Lower Delaware County, where they have to always raise the taxes so that they can pay for the school, the state will take more of that burden. And that's what the Commonwealth Court told us in their decision last year.
Right now, we have, based on this, a board or committee that has been there. Actually, the government has appointed some people to it, but they're tasked really with giving a projection for what it will cost to meet the constitutional requirements of the Commonwealth Court's ruling. Now, that number is pretty staggering. It's $5.4 billion the last time I looked. Well, how do we get from where we're at in our budget to there?
So it's easy. I remember, Chuck, when I first started learning how to drive, my mother actually told me to stop shortly after we started because I wasn't stopping fast enough. I was accelerating too fast. Don't tell anyone that. Things are much better now. That was years and years ago. But seriously, we have to ease into it. It's just like getting on the highway yielding. You can't get on a highway and go 100 miles an hour. We don't have the ability to spend $6 billion in one budget. School districts, we talking about wish lists, they wouldn't be able to spend all that money in one school year. Last year, thanks to Governor Shapiro and thanks to our Republican friends in the Senate, we did the largest investment in public education yet by adding $1 billion total. And that's, of course, preschool all the way to what we get in higher education. So it's not just K through 12. What we need to do is focus on K through 12 and put another $1 billion in it as the governor proposes, because then we will be easing our way to doing fair funding. What this means, Chuck, is we'll have a generation of students. If they're in first grade now, by the time they get to the 12th grade, they will be fully, fairly funded. They will have opportunities that their bigger sister or their bigger brother didn't have. They'll have more modern classrooms. They'll have libraries with a librarian, and they'll have the ability to not just know there should be hope, but they will feel that hope by going into a building around the corner from their house, or for our rural neighbors, miles and miles away once they're in the school bus, to say, hey, somebody cares about me, whether they think we're in Harrisburg, DC, or Borough Hall. They will know they are important. And that's what's key. We have to get them ready for the workforce and get them ready for the opportunities that wait.
If you don't have adequate education, K through 12, your percentages of getting those types of jobs and living a productive life go down by like 50%. It's a staggering number. So we have that obligation. And one thing I talked to you a bit off camera, just because we've had a rash of violence in Northeast and in the Scranton area recently, I did a show with a number of representatives from law enforcement and prosecutors, but also a Democratic senator and my good friend, Marty Flynn. And he made a very eloquent argument that, the issue of public education and the inadequacy of it in many of the poorer school districts, like Scranton is one of them that hasn't been adequately funded, there's a direct correlation then to gang activity, because if they're not getting an education, some of them don't even go to school, well, they end up going down a bad road. So that segues into some of your initiatives I'd like you to talk about. You've been very outspoken about supporting law enforcement, supporting public safety, but then also dealing with some of the realities, the other side of the equation, relative to, you can't, if you have a record that keeps you from getting a job or anything, or buying a home or getting a mortgage, well, you kind of go right back to prison. You go right back into the criminal system again. So talk about some of your initiatives in that. I was pretty impressed by some of what you're doing relative to small offenses and clearing records, relative to minor probation violations and things like that. So talk a little bit about your public safety and public awareness initiatives and what you have in mind.
Yeah, so when we talk about public safety, that is a really top of the ticket item for Democrats. We are seeing the challenges in urban, suburban, and rural communities. And we have seen, a lack of law enforcement, many since 2020 leaving the profession. So we see it as something we have to do in a multifaceted way. One of the bills I was glad got across the finish line, although it just will start in the southeast of PA, we hope it can go back to the state Senate and help everybody. They changed the language. We need to attract more officers. We need to get more officers on the street. I always say if we have more on the street, then we can have more detectives opening the files and figuring out these crimes, holding people accountable. One of the investments that we've been able to make is just to make sure that they have more modern crime labs so that we can get DNA off of these terrible scenes. But you're right, Chuck. We have to make sure that our youngest people who sadly are committing a larger deal of these types of cases than ever before in record time, that they know this isn't an option. And to my good friend, and he used to be a state rep, but I won't brag, Senator Flynn, as he said, I served with him for years in Harrisburg in the House, and now, of course, he's in the Senate. He graduated to the upper chamber. We have to let the youth know what their life can be, what their options can be. So when we talk about violence prevention, it's not only making sure they can't get their hands on illegal guns, but we have to also make sure they understand they have a future by going into a well-funded public education. In addition, we've sent a few public safety bills over to the Senate that are wildly popular amongst people who believe in the Second Amendment. I always say we can keep second graders safe while also defending the Second Amendment. Ghost guns, that's something we talked about off camera.
Right.
That's something some people aren't familiar with, but everybody who believes in the Second Amendment
I didn't know about it until I read your news release.
You should be able to get on your phone and go on a website and say, send me parts of a gun. It's not traced. It's no serial number. It's no background check. You can buy it as a child if you have a credit card number or however they accept payment. So we want to ban them in Pennsylvania. And we sent that bill over to the state Senate. So while it's not wildly popular to do public safety gun bills, they are a factor. We have to have less firearms available for youth to do bad things because they put all of us at risk. Law enforcement, fellow children, everybody. So we've got to use every tool in the toolbox to talk about investing in public safety, including violence intervention programs. That's out of school time, summer jobs. All of these things are needed to make sure we keep our community safer.
Excellent. And one, not to be too fine a point of it, you've actually been very proactive, and I'm a law and order conservative kind of personality, as you remember, that you are tweaking the requirements or the let's say the gatekeeping to promote more police officers. In other words, that the antiquated rules of what you had to meet the standard test, the baseline test to even qualify to become a police officer, you have had the position that it's antiquated. And since we have recruiting problems, as you pointed out, and since 2020, we don't have enough officers, well, a lot of them get knocked out right in the first page of the application because they don't. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was really important for the new administration that we have here in the city of Philly, where I live. Mayor Sherelle Parker came to us and said, listen, one of the biggest challenges among many, as a new mayor that she was going to face is this shortage. And it turns out that there's actually a literacy requirement. And depending on where you went to public school, you may not have the vocabulary that's efficient enough to do pass the test with flying colors. Right. So we didn't waive it, but what we did is say you can get into the academy, get tutoring, and pass it before you graduate. And that's like a small change that's going to make a big difference. And it turns out, Chuck, back to our public education discussion, it's graduates of the school district who are not familiar. And now I don't want to date myself because everyone thinks I'm a kid, but over 25 years ago, I remember learning pages and pages and SAT words, learn this, learn that, learn the root of the word. So if our young people today are not learning at that level, we don't want any door to be closed in their face if they're brave and bold enough to want to protect us and keep us safe.
Excellent. Yeah, good answer. And those kinds of things, for example, the analogy I was thinking about when you were speaking just now, it's kind of like what a GED equivalency is. Like if you dropped out of high school before getting your diploma, but to get like a good job, you need a minimum of a high school education, you can go back and pretty much online get your GED and then get qualified for the job. So it sounds like it's comparable in a way, to various, like you said, literacy and other issues, to have a certain standard of expertise that you can kind of learn that while you're learning to be a law enforcement officer. So sounds like
That's
a good
right.
idea.
In the physical requirements, it's like, yes, you got to be able to run fast, but if you're a few seconds short and we have fewer and fewer applicants, should we tell them to come back when they get it a few seconds short, or should we give them the time over the academy where they're going to be running every day and swimming every day and doing all sorts of studying and enhancements? Can't they have that time so that they pass that requirement then? And the bill was going to be statewide. It was offered by one of my suburban colleagues, Representative Dan Williams in Chester County. But once it got to the Senate, they made that small change to focus on Philadelphia for now. But we'll see how it goes, and hopefully we can expand it to the 66 other counties, because it's not something that's only a challenge here.
Right. One thing I have to compliment you on, because I read about it, seeing things come across your desk, and I think it's something, since you believe in, is important to talk about, that we should talk about. It's basically, and I hope I'm getting the names right, it's the Black Mama Initiative. There apparently is a high mortality rate among African American women. We talk as a country and even as a state that birth rates are at record lows. I think you're aware. But you have been an advocate for that in making sure that they get fair and equal treatment. So can you talk a little bit about the initiative and what you're trying to accomplish? Because
absolutely,
anything that, like, the Democrats sometimes get a bad rap relative to the abortion issue, that they're pro-abortion and all that, and then Republicans say we're pro-life. But you and I both know the world is gray. It's not white or black. And that here you have black women trying to have children, and they need to have the resources to do so. Could talk a little bit about that, because it kind of intrigued me.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't know that Black women are 300% higher than white women to die either during or right after pregnancy and childbirth, or within the first year of having their child. And most of it happens when it happens during childbirth. It's because some of our practitioners are not trained to understand the cries of every patient. And each of us, we have our own biases. You like ketchup, someone likes mustard. We come with our own preferences. And many times they're so innate, we're not aware of them. So what we're learning, and it is a study out, thanks to Governor Shapiro and my colleagues for creating this maternal health caucus, they are studying to see, why are there so many deaths, more Black women than white women? Why are they dying? Because what we'll find out once we figure out the main causes is how to better train our practitioners, how to have alternative medicine in the birthing room in hospitals. That's a doula, that's a midwife. I mean, whatever it is that you think you might need to support you. And I'll just say, on my trip to Northeast PA last summer, I was able to go to Maternal and Family Health Services, where they provide women all throughout Northeastern Pennsylvania. They serve something like 20 counties, these types of services to decrease maternal mortality of all their patients. Right. And it's a real serious issue, because if we are losing families, if our families are falling apart at the start, I mean, it's just stark. It's sad, it's awful, but most importantly, we need to prevent it. It's 2024. This isn't years and years and years ago where we didn't have access to World Health. We've got all these great medical schools, Geisinger, all of them so close to where you are. We have to make sure the practitioners are trained to be sensitive to all their patients' needs, and that they're not dismissing anyone. We've watched documentaries, and many times they'll say, I told the doctor I wasn't feeling good. I told the nurse I wasn't feeling good. They said, oh, it's all right. It's normal. But they end up having some major complications. So we look forward to that being a long-term project that we can resolve to support these families who do want to expand their footprint on this planet by having a child.
Right. It just struck me as you were giving that answer, Madam Speaker, that the National Democrats might do well to have you become their spokesperson in this upcoming election. We've just had a conversation. I am a longtime Democrat, switched to Republican, and now switched back to independent because there's nuts on the far right, actually, as I found, is the far left. So, but at any rate, always was conservative, but we're having a conversation from a leading Democrat in the state about matters like buttressing and supporting recruitment for more police officers. Not exactly a Democratic talking point till I heard you talk about it. And about more family-related, pro-life type things of bringing children into the world and ending family dysfunction at the start by losing too many women of color in pregnancy and in childbirth. So maybe you should be their national spokesperson because you're expressing the issue much more eloquently than they seem capable. Just letting you know from my standpoint as a conservative.
No comment. Maybe you know somebody. If you know somebody, Chuck, put in a good word.
Well, I don't anymore, but I used to, Madam Speaker. At any rate, let's talk about, we've talked about some of my issues. What other issues matter to you that you think can get done besides public education?
Yes, in addition to public education, we need to create jobs and improve economic development and competitiveness. We want Pennsylvania not just to be known as the birthplace of our country and the birthplace of our democracy, but we also want to be headquarters for manufacturing, for eds and meds, for discovering all the challenges that we have with medical conditions. That some of that has to do with how we do business. I was able to be at the statewide chamber just a couple of weeks ago in Harrisburg at their breakfast, talking about how can we make Pennsylvania the most competitive it can be. And when we do our state budget, that gives us the opportunity to do so. So many of the folks who come to my office to meet say, we just need a little bit more state investment and that'll help us match dollars. Folks who are working hard, trying to cure cancer, trying to cure diseases, trying to create incubation spaces for sciences. We have eds, we have meds. I talked about Geisinger. Yeah, I was in Pittsburgh the Friday before last, looking at a new medical school Duquesne has. We have a lot to do to properly position ourselves as where people want to do business and where families want to stay and grow. And through the budget process, we can invest. We've got rainy day dollars where we have to decide what are we doing to restructure our tax code, to lower corporate taxes so that they want to be built here and stay here and create jobs. I'm driving through NEPA and I'll be coming to do some events in two Fridays. There's so many warehouses. But we want to make sure that folks don't just have a warehouse job, but that they're paid well, that they're respected well. And some of that comes in with finally raising the minimum wage to just send a message that we value and we respect our workers. We also want to support healthy communities. What does it mean to have food that we can afford? Hello, the prices seem to keep going up. There are corporations making big money off of us. Why can't we have more locally grown food from Pennsylvania on our shelves that we can buy and that we can support and just have that Pennsylvania dollar going round and round and round? So we have a lot of things we can do through the state budget. Of course, we want to invest in our children. We want to keep seniors in homes, but we have a lot to do to posture ourselves as to be the next headquarters for you fill in the blank, Chuck. We don't want to get passed by for opportunities. We want all the opportunities to stay here and to flourish here.
Well, that's a great answer. And you mentioned your minimum wage. I have to touch on that. I remember talking about the same minimum wage 10 years ago that we're still talking about. And while 15 is pretty much a non-starter, $15 an hour, by the same token, 7.5 probably isn't getting it done either. So your comment on that.
I came out of school in 2006. I waited tables all through law school, 2003 to 2006. And the minimum wage is still what it is now. It's under $3 for tipped wage workers. And I met with restaurateurs, smaller family-owned restaurants who tell me Our tip staff do way better without increasing the wage. So we have to get our heads around what it looks like for the larger employers to be able to pay a decent wage. When we think about the fact that Pennsylvania has been stuck for now, it's going on 20 years. We're not there yet. We got to get to 2026, and then it'll officially be the same wage as 20 years. Yeah. Ohio, West Virginia, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware. Let me not skip over Delaware. Every state that is our neighbor has a higher minimum wage. That's unacceptable. And when I had the debate on the floor last spring, Chuck, every one of my Republican friends said, nobody makes it. Well, if nobody makes it, raise it. If nobody's making it anyway, then there's no harm in going ahead and raising it. As I said, for employers of a certain status, and the tipped wage is a separate conversation. We don't have time to get into all that today. Because I waited tables, I always tip. If I'm somewhere where they already get a larger wage, it says service, and I still tip. But everybody's not me. I understand we're all unique and different, but we have to finally do it because it's embarrassingly low.
Yeah. Well, and I'll give you now the unscrupulous side of it. Certain clubs that I have been at, and it's an amazing thing, and a couple I'm a member of, believe it or not, they actually have now a gratuity they include right in the bill when you get your bar bill or your food bill. And amazingly, you would think, okay, well, that's a good thing because it's 20%, until you find out they're using that to pay the wages, which are our minimum wage. So they're kind of taking the tips ridiculous. So, there are a lot of sides to this. But we're running out of time, JoAnna. I want to get you out one final point we haven't touched on, the earned income tax credit. Where is that at? I think, obviously for working mothers to have that tax credit to help pay for childcare, that's one of the issues, right? Paying childcare with that. Where is that at?
So that's something we want to increase in Pennsylvania. As I said a little bit earlier, we increased the child care tax credit. So if you paid certain amount last year, you got your federal taxes, or you're going to get a big chunk from the state because we now match the federal rate. But in earned income, we need to do better with that. We need to increase it. I've always said that, the average salary in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania right now is under 55, it's about 55,000. But we need to get to a cadre where we say, whether it's 40 or 45, that we say your what you pay is lower. Because if you get a little bit more back through an earned income tax program, those dollars will recirculate right in our community. You'll be able to spend more money. You'll be able to make purchases. We talked about people buying homes. One of the reasons why I'm such an advocate for minimum wages, there's not a place in Pennsylvania where if you work 40 hours at $7.25, you can afford an apartment. Not one place, because the minimum rent is over $1,000, and you don't make that if you work 40 hours at $7.25. But that's a whole nother conversation. When we look at minimum wage earners, most of them are women. Many of those women are raising families. So when we think about all of these things and tax credit programs for workers, these help to keep dollars in Pennsylvania and reinvest in our economy while saving our taxpayers a much needed break. So while that hasn't come to the level that we wanted to, it's one of the issues we'll be talking about at the bargaining table throughout this budget.
Right. Well, regrettably, JoAnna, our time has slipped away on us again. But I hope to bring you back so we can talk about after June 30th, what made it and how we're doing. And I have to congratulate you. Your first time in this show, I had said in your resume that you were just named top 40, under 40 most powerful people in Pennsylvania. Well, I understand now you've graduated all the way to 4th most powerful person in Pennsylvania. I believe Governor Shapiro is 1, U.S. Senator Bob Casey is 2. President Pro Tem Republican Kim Ward is 3, and you're 4. So you're running out of room for growth there. There's only a few places you can go. Thank you for your time,
Madam
Speaker.
Thank you.